I'm Christine Madrid French, and I'm the author of a book about director Alfred Hitchcock and American modern architecture, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Gild. Nowhere in the world celebrates modernism better than Modernism Week in Palm Springs, California. Every February, they have a huge architecture and design festival, and for the last 5 years, U.S. Modernist has been there interviewing nearly all of Modernism Week's keynote speakers, plus special guests at the U.S. Modernist compound, aka poolside, at the very swanky Hotel Skylark. There's a shining star for Robert and Helene Alexander on the Palm Springs Walk of Stars downtown. It was installed just this past February during Mod Week. Although largely unknown outside of California, the Alexanders were critically important developers and builders to the expansion of modernism. While other developers were afraid of modernist design, as a lot still are today, sad to say, the Alexanders went all in, working with important architects like William Cody and Bill Krisel to create thousands of homes we love. Today, George Smart talks with Jill Alexander Kitnick, daughter of the Alexanders, and Jim Harlan, author of a new book on the Alexanders. Then later in the show, George and I chat with our special musical guest, Colleen Duffy from Devil Doll, singing from her new album, plus her biggest hit, Bourbon in Your Eyes. This year at Modernism Week, I really dug a new innovation they've got at nighttime in Palm Springs during Mod Week, where they actually project information about each building onto the building in the evening. It's like closed captioning for modernists.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, and I don't know if they'd done that previously, but this year it was just neat. You can walk around, and if you think you're looking at something memorable, you probably are if you see a little factoid projected onto it.
All around town, and particularly on the downtown stretch on Palm Canyon, they have these special little lights called Gobo Lights that come up at nighttime and project sentences, numbers up on the side of buildings so that you can look at a building and you can see immediately what year it was built and who the architect was.
Right.
It's just amazing. If you're into mid-century modern, Modernism Week is a joyous, all-you-can-view festival of mid-century architecture, art galleries, nonprofit benefit events, lectures, martinis, movie premieres, and amazing parties at incredible modernist houses. And there's much more too. For me, one highlight is always the Palm Springs Architecture and Design Museum, which used to be a bank, which is right downtown. A number of years ago, it was taken over by the Palm Springs Museum of Art, with one of their key supporters, Beth Edwards Harris, providing a lot of the funding to make this happen. And it's just a jewel box of a building where they put in specialty exhibits. It's a great place to walk around, and also, while you're looking at the exhibits, you can be admiring the building.
That's true. It's a strong box as well as a jewel box, because
it is.
Nobody's going to be breaking in there to steal anything.
Well, no. And what's funny is everything in that museum, that little museum, is named. Like there's a drive-through over at the side where, it used to be a bank. There was a drive-through window, and then the window has a patron.
Yeah, I saw that.
And downstairs, the bathrooms have patrons.
I didn't notice that.
So it's important that everybody get a chance to get involved and participate and get recognized in that way. Would you like to go with us in February 2021 and stay at the U.S. Modernist compound during Modernism Week? Here's a typical day. You wake up about 7:30 maybe, get a shower, come out about 8. There's this incredible breakfast prepared for you, and coffee and frittatas and waffles and bacon, and all your friends are around and you're eating breakfast, talking about what you did the night before. And then it's off to some sort of great tour or walking experience or exhibition until about noon. And then you come back, maybe you'll have lunch by the pool, you'll relax a little bit, and then you've got to get ready because at 5 o'clock, it's your nightly party. You're going to get dressed up and go to some unbelievable modernist house for a couple hours. There'll be a reception. Then maybe you'll go to dinner. Maybe you'll already be full. You come back to the hotel, sit around the fire pit, talk with your friends again, and then go to bed. And the next day, you do it all over again, day after day after day. It's really horrible, isn't it, Tom?
It's terrible, but it is nice to know that you fit in time for naps as well.
So if you'd like to go, email me, george@usmodernist.org. US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Nichiha.com/USModernist and by Modernist realtor Angela Roll.
In her ongoing fictional life, resourceful Angela Roll was out of money on the streets of Paris. She only had 5 trusted friends: Jada, a computer expert; Alme, an expert at makeup and disguises; Yonat, an acrobat and former Mossad agent; Baby G, a former adult entertainer turned rapper; and her Aunt Jennifer, who made lunch. Angela managed to mastermind a midnight heist from a Pan Am 747 at Charles de Gaulle Airport, stealing a rare limited edition Banksy in her bright yellow Mini Cooper S, John Cooper Works edition. Days later, driving through the streets of Monte Carlo, she was chased by Interpol detective Eric von Roll and his twin brothers Kaiser and Chibata Roll, who nearly captured her. But she escaped by jetpack, because all heroines have one, and came to America to become a real estate agent specializing in modernist houses. Now Angela advises buyers and sellers on everything from appropriate renovation to turning off that annoying shredding feature on your Banksy. Reach her at angelaroll.com, that's ROEHL, or call her at 919-995-0550.
Thank you, Tom. Robert and Helene Alexander of Palm Springs were important developers and builders to the expansion of modernism, working with important architects of the time like William Cody and Bill Krisel to create a legacy of great houses we love. From Palm Springs, I talked with Jill Alexander Kitnick, daughter of the Alexanders, and Jim Harlan, author of a new book, The Alexanders, A Desert Legacy. Later in the show, a very special treat, Tom and I chat with musical guest Colleen Duffy from Devil Doll. Let's go poolside in Palm Springs and learn more about the first family of modernist development in Palm Springs, the Alexanders. Jill, it's great to have you here, and this is going to be quite an honor this week as your family gets on the Palm Springs Walk of Stars. That's fabulous.
Totally.
Isn't that great?
Thrilled.
When did you hear about this?
I would say about a year ago, my husband Barry started making little sounds that something was stirring. Almost
little sounds like meep, nyarp, nyap, nyap.
Little hints and clues that maybe after 55 years, they were going to be acknowledged with a star down here in the desert.
Was he working on this, or were other people working on this?
Other people were working. A lovely man who I've yet to meet or speak to, named David Himes,
Okay.
Who inherited a mid-century modern Alexander home from his aunt, was very taken with his home and his life in that home, and realized that the Alexanders, George and Bob, as builders, had never been acknowledged and recognized, and he felt it was due time, and he asked Barry and I if he could spearhead a campaign to try and make that happen.
So the Alexanders, they were not architects, they were builders and developers, right?
They were builders and a father-son team, builders and developers, from starting in 1957 in the desert.
And they built hundreds, if not a few thousand houses here, right?
Actually, 1,200.
1,200 total, okay.
In maybe 6 different developments, starting with Twin Palm Estates. And what I always love about Twin Palms, every house had 2 palm trees in front. That was the signature.
Well,
Yeah.
The Alexanders work with a variety of architects in this area. Who were they working with?
Well, my dad briefly went to USC, and he met a young architect named William Krisel, and he was pushing his father, who was more of a veteran builder, to experiment and do something more modern and, a little more experimental, and my grandfather was not taking the bait.
Yeah,
and
not interested.
Not interested, but when...
Who wants to do this newfangled stuff?
When
Not me.
he my grandfather met William Krisel, he was very, very impressed with him and let my father basically experiment. And it was so cost efficient, it was so new and different that it really, really, truly caught on.
It's like,
and my grandfather,
I can make some money here
exactly.
and make these cool houses. Yeah.
Yeah, and he liked that bottom line of, making some money.
And this really took off. I mean, this became enormously successful for the family.
It did. They were in the process of many developments. They had a vested interest in the racket club. They were going to be remodeling that. They had a lot cooking.
So your father and grandfather had caught on to this great new wave of construction. And also at the same time, Hollywood was all over the place. So there were some famous commissions that came out of this.
Well, I'll tell you, the first big project they did was the Ocotillo Lodge.
Okay.
And that is in the south end of town. And my grandparents, who lived and were based in Los Angeles, started coming down and staying at their unit at the Ocotillo Lodge. And they absolutely embraced this town and loved it and loved the lifestyle. And I think that really made the development of their projects more appealing. He was here more.
Okay.
And so that was a really interesting thing. But they had different ranges of developments as they really did catch on. Like Racket Club Road Estates, they were bigger. They had maids' rooms in them. They were, a little more expensive. But most of these homes were really considered second homes for people. They weren't terribly well insulated. Mm-hmm. They were air conditioned, but they were very affordable. And they had a whole way of developing materials and whatnot to make them super cost efficient.
The revolution in materials at that time made a lot of this possible. The steel, for instance, and the new textures for windows and for building walls and for defending against the sun.
The original houses were wood-based, and
mm-hmm.
later they became steel-based, and then the steel became prohibitive,
okay.
the cost of the steel.
Okay. Now, weren't Elvis and Priscilla somehow involved in one of your family's houses?
Well, my father started to build a very monumental home, and it wasn't necessarily going to be a private home for himself, but my mother Helene fell in love with the house as it was being developed. And as all the other homes were very efficient and they had the indoor-outdoor livability and they were more modular, this home, which is called the House of Tomorrow, was either each room was a circle or a combination of circles. And the outside of the house was round and it was very organic and very appealing in that way. And my mother decided that this was going to be her home and she really wanted it.
I've seen some great pictures online of your parents lounging in that house. I mean, they're just so cool. It's just, it's like magazine quality. Wow.
They were pretty cool.
Yeah.
They were pretty cool. So the way Elvis plays into this, Elvis and Priscilla, is after the accident, the tragedy in 1965, the house was rented to Elvis and Priscilla, and they called it their honeymoon home. But they never actually owned the home, but they did live there and rent.
Lived there for a while.
Yes.
Tell us about the accident.
The accident happened November 14th, 1965. I was 13 years old. My parents and grandparents were invited to go on a Learjet to fly into Los Angeles, where my uncle Sheldon Appel, who is my mother's younger brother, had built at a very young age himself a high-rise apartment building in West Hollywood.
Okay.
And they were flying to the opening big gala of celebrating that building. And there was a man named Dick Corrett who was on the plane. Bob Prescott owned Flying Tiger Line, who owned Flying Tiger. And he invited my family to, and I was actually invited to go to that opening as well. It was on a Sunday evening. I was an only child, still am, and my friends were very important to me. My dear friend Peggy, who's sitting to my left for moral support right now, I wanted to be with my friends. That was more important. I had my outfit laid out.
Well, sure, you're 13, right? You've got to have your loyalties.
Exactly. So I stayed home and did my homework and got excited to go to school, see my friends, have my regular life. And apparently the plane had been in an air show that day, earlier in the day, and I think there were weather issues. There's a lot written about it. I'm not exactly sure of all the details, but the plane pretty much went up in there and went into the mountain.
Okay.
And later, Frank Sinatra's mother was killed in a very similar plane crash on a Learjet that had a similar trajectory and result.
So that was in the mountains near Palm Springs Airport. So it was right after takeoff, I guess.
Pretty much.
Pretty much. Was this a nighttime thing or a daytime?
Late afternoon.
Okay.
Is my recollection.
So I don't know the history of Learjets. Were they fairly new at that time?
They were fairly new.
Okay.
And Bob Prescott's son, who owned Flying Tiger Line, was also on that plane.
So this was an enormous tragedy for the town, for you, for your family. What happened after that?
Well, from my perspective, my parents particularly were very big fish in a rather small pond. They were very engaging. They were very philanthropic. They were quite the hub. People enjoyed them tremendously, liked to be around them. They gave fantastic parties. I was pretty involved with my friends. I knew them. I loved them. They protected me. It was really, their party.
And what was life like for you after that? Who raised you from that point?
Well, interestingly, my father and my uncle, neither of whom had a brother, were like brothers. And we would spend a month every summer in Newport Beach, renting a beach house and spending time with them. So my father and my uncle had an agreement that God forbid anything happened to either of their families. My uncle had 3 kids younger than me already, 3 children and a wife, Carol. And they agreed that if anything happened to either of them, they would, assume the responsibility of their children. So I went to live from a small town in Palm Springs, moved to Los Angeles, and put on my blinders and went forward the best I could.
And you were in Newport Beach at that point?
No, in Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles,
yes,
okay.
West LA.
And you went to high school there, I guess?
Junior high and high school.
In high school.
And UCLA College.
And did your career after that get into arts and architecture at all, or something different?
I studied art history.
Okay.
I used to spend a lot of time in the Palm Springs Desert Museum. I always was interested in art and museums, and I later went on to have a relatively short-lived art gallery of my own.
Okay. And the star that's going to be on the Walk of Stars, do you know where it's going to be at this point?
It's going to be near the Art and Architecture Museum that's part of the Palm Springs Desert Museum of Art.
Okay, good. That's where I was hoping that they were going to put it, down there. Because all those people who are memorialized in the sidewalk really kind of knew each other. They hung out with each other back at that time.
That's true.
So it's pretty cool that they're all remembered in that same way.
Well, I think builders are really important because architects' visions can't be realized without builders. They can design away, but I think my father and grandfather were very supportive of those architects, many of them.
If you go on our website at usmodernist.org, you can look up all the famous Palm Springs architects, and when we know about it, we have cited the Alexander family as builders. So thank you so much, Jill, for joining me. This has been great.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It was fun.
That was George Smart with Jill Alexander Kitnick, daughter of Robert and Helene Alexander. Now, coming up, George visits with Jim Harlan, author of The Alexanders, A Desert Legacy. But now, first, a moment of reflection from Nietzsche.
Beauty, love, durability, designed to last for years to come, bringing you peace and tranquility. You feel relaxed, knowing your house can easily achieve any exterior look and any color. Wood, concrete. Your house loves feeling this good. And you love feeling this good. Nietzsche, 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 Nietzsche. Say it with me. Nietzsche. Advanced engineering. Nietzsche, Nietzsche. Durability. visit nichia.com/US Modernist. Nichia. That's NICH. Wait for it. A look you'll love. Nichia.
Jim Harlan is an architect, artist, author, and passionate preservationist. After moving to LA to attend the USC School of Architecture, he opened up his own architecture studio in 1989 to focus on modern residential projects. His work has been featured in the LA Times, Metropolitan Home, and Architecture Digest. He's on the board of the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation and is the author of a new book in their ongoing series, The Alexanders: A Desert Legacy. Here we go with Jim poolside in Palm Springs.
When I first heard about the Alexanders as a neophyte to Palm Springs who knew nothing about nobody, it was in connection with the Elvis and Priscilla Presley honeymoon house. That was kind of the glamour mention that got on the brochures and people were talking about. But they didn't own that house, did they?
No, Bob Alexander had that house built for himself. And Helene, his wife, was unaware.
Oh, okay. It was a surprise.
It was a surprise, but it was, I did my research at the Getty, where Bill Krisel's drawings are. And it was Helene's bathroom, Helene's closet. So Bob brought her in right before it was finished and said, "Would you like to live in this house?" And she said, "Absolutely." So it was, it's the House of Tomorrow designed by Bill Krisel for Bob and Helene Alexander.
And there are any number of stunning photos
from
that era of that couple.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they were rock stars. They were Brad and Angie, and they were so generous with their time and their money.
How so?
He was the president of the Desert Circus. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
No, what was that?
They no longer do it. It was a fundraiser and parade. And they would lock you up in a jail, and you'd have to be bailed out by a friend.
Oh, yeah. They still do that around the country. It just has different names now.
Right.
Yeah.
So they did that every year here. So Bob was the president for several years. I can't really recall all the boards and the charities that they were involved with, but many, many.
And the Alexanders, I understand that the father of this was not that excited about modern design. He had to be pulled into it.
Absolutely. A lot of people believe that the Alexanders had their start here in Palm Springs. But they had a long building career in Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley, post-World War II. And Bob was starting to join the company, and he wanted to build a modern house. It's not your father's Oldsmobile type of thing. And so Bill Krisel is reciting this for me, and he was very emphatic. George Alexander, the father, said to Bob, "This is an exercise to prove you wrong. I'm going to let you build 10 houses." This was 1954. You can build 10 houses in Woodland Hills, which is San Fernando Valley. And the outcome of those homes they were cheaper to build and they sold faster. George was not a stupid man.
Yeah.
He had an epiphany. So next they build 287 homes down the street, all modern, designed by Bill Krisel. And at that point, he was advised to leave Los Angeles. Take it easy. He was 55 years old. I believe it was a heart problem. I'm not positive, but they moved here for his health.
Oh.
And he just couldn't help himself. He saw the opportunity. I mean, that was his brilliance at the time. So let's say they moved here in 54. Palm Springs was predominantly single-family homes. There were 2 tracts that I'm aware of. The Truesdale tract,
Okay.
a little south of town, 200 and some, And then there are 18 or so fray. So he saw an opportunity to build quality production track homes. His first project, Twin Palms, was featured in Progressive Architecture.
Yes.
March of 58.
Right. I've seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Alexanders, for me, as a researcher in all of this, were really one of the very few companies to start building these homes at scale early on. This was attempted other places in the country, but generally they either just went out of business or decided they couldn't sell modern, had to sell little, ranchy type houses or Cape Cod houses. They abandoned the modernist ideal.
Well, I have two thoughts regarding that.
Yeah.
One is because they were vacation homes, people were a little more willing to embrace the modernism. It wasn't their full house. I grew up in Chicago, and we had a little lake house, and we had black and white houndstooth check.
Oh, yeah.
And red carpeting, because my mother could have fun, George was an accountant, and he did accounting for people's books. And some of them were builders, and he realized how profitable that could be. And so he developed these principles of, one, you do not start a project until all the materials are on site or adjacent. Two, the projects came as a kit. So they were assembled.
Yes.
No cutting required. And then three, he hired talented modernist architects. So it was a wonderful product that they were producing.
And this sounds so simple to say it today, but to have it be done back then like that, why was it not more reproduced? I mean, it seems like if they could do it, it could be done in other places in the country, but other places in the country just could not get their act together mostly.
Yes, and even in the Valley. I mean, there were imitators.
Yeah.
Definitely. But they could never produce the quantity that the Alexanders were able to. I mean, the Alexanders produced a better product.
Mm-hmm. So the Alexanders were riding high for quite a while, 10 years?
Yes, they were here for 10 years.
And then there was the plane accident.
Yes, and I say it's cruelly ironic that a man who came to Palm Springs for his health dies in a plane crash.
Yeah.
Heading back to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Along with his wife, son, and his wife, and 4 other passengers. A total of 8 people died on that plane.
Was it one of these situations where the plane couldn't see? Do you know the details of how it happened?
It's Kobe Bryant accident all over again. They should not have been flying.
Okay.
And the odd thing is, they died on Bill Krisel's birthday.
Huh.
I mean, a little spooky. And then Bill Krisel's father his first name is Alexander.
Okay. Well, a few coincidences there.
Very odd.
I'm not sure if there's any meaning we can distill from all that other than randomness, but...
None, because I talked to Bill about it, and he's just, it's just random history.
So what motivated you to write the book, The Alexanders, A Desert Legacy?
I wrote the book while I was on the board of the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation, and it's also referred to as PSPF.
Which sounds like a suntan lotion to me all the time. Like, let's put on a little PSPF to protect ourselves while we're out here.
Yes. So as a board member, we all took a pledge that we'd write a book. Mm-hmm. It was our president at the time, Ron Marshall, and it would provide an income stream over the years.
Yes.
To help us with our preservation.
Yes.
And when the Alexanders came up, I immediately raised my hand. I'm an architect. And the last thing prior to this, really the last thing that I wrote was my college application.
Yes.
But really, this was all about problem solving the puzzle. And I believe it's our best-selling book.
Really?
Yeah, for the foundation.
So do you do book signings during Modernism Week for this?
Yes, I did. I lectured on Friday, and then we did a book signing afterwards, before the Star.
Right. There was a star on the Palm Springs Walk of Fame for the Alexanders, which is great.
And rightly so, it's in front of the Design Museum.
Now, how can people get a hold of this book?
They sell it at the Visitor Center.
Okay.
At the beginning of town, the Fray.
Out by the tramway, yes.
They sell it there.
Can you get it through PSPF?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming by. It's a pleasure to talk with you. And I'm glad that you've brought the Alexanders some of the recognition they deserve.
Well, thank you. It's unfortunate that our listeners can't see where we are, but I'm speaking to you with this beautiful background of mountains.
Well, we're coming back in 2021, so if you're interested in coming with us to stay here at the beautiful U.S. Modernist compound, you can contact me at george@usmodernist.org.
That was Jim Harlan, author of The Alexanders, A Desert Legacy. Music has changed so much over the years. We've seen albums go to 8 tracks, to cassettes, to CDs, and now to streaming. One of the very first songs I ever heard on streaming was on Pandora, a song called Bourbon in Your Eyes by Colleen Duffy of Devil Doll. We're going to hear it later on. But first, let's chat with Colleen about her new album. I am thrilled to introduce our special musical guest, Colleen Duffy of Devil Doll. Colleen was the first female rockabilly radio host in the United States, hosting Rockability at Case Western Reserve station WRUW from 1990 to 1995. Even before that, she was performing homemade Elvis concerts for her neighbors in Cleveland, and she's been touring as Devil Doll for over 20 years.
I love me some homemade Elvis records.
Devil Doll put sex back in rock and roll with a true female star, a cross between, get this list, Jessica Rabbit, Joan Jett, and Johnny Cash.
Oh, man.
Her song, Faith in Love, from the album Queen of Pain, was featured on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And it's her hit, Bourbon in Your Eyes, which we'll hear later, that people love on Spotify and Pandora. A huge hit since 2002. Since 2014, Colleen has been dealing with EDS, a connective tissue disorder. And when she recovered, she recorded her first studio album in 10 years, Lover and a Fighter, which we'll hear from in a minute. Colleen, welcome to the show.
Well, hello there, George. How are you?
I'm good. Now, you're in Cleveland now, right? But you haven't always lived there.
No, I'm originally from Cleveland, and I had gone to Chicago and then New York, and then was in Los Angeles for quite some time. And due to the medical stuff, I ended up coming back to Cleveland about 5 years ago.
Because Cleveland's a huge medical center. Most people don't know that necessarily.
If you're going to get sick, crawl your way to Cleveland. We have the Cleveland Clinic. We have university hospitals. We have an incredibly progressive medical community here. It definitely is something to brag about for sure.
But hopefully you don't need it.
No, I mean, it did save my life when I came back. Things can get, there are some great resources in Los Angeles, but you can really get lost in the cracks in Los Angeles. And there is just so much stuff happening in Cleveland. You know, you have a couple of these mega centers in the United States, like Johns Hopkins, Vanderbilt, the Cleveland Clinic, you know, and so forth, that are just pure magic is coming out of their labs. And some of these progressive doctors are really thinking outside of the box. Finally, it's kind of exciting, you know. But if you're in fight or flight, it's really hard to go into that creative process.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's some pretty good architecture in Cleveland, right? For example, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any favorite buildings in town, Colleen?
Yeah, I do have some favorite. Oh, I was like, I think he's going to ask me this, and I'm so bad with names. My brain can be like a torn sieve at times. And there are a couple houses. We have a strip of houses on the east side going from Cleveland Heights through Shaker, and it's called Fairmount. And there are all these mansions, and they do their decor up every Christmas, and it's just breathtakingly gorgeous. And since I was a tot, we would drive all the way down Fairmount looking at all these houses, and they're just really, truly breathtaking. But we do have some, actually going to Case Western Reserve, we do have a very cool piece of architecture that was built a few years back. The guy who did the Disney Theater in downtown Los Angeles.
Frank Gehry.
Yeah. I believe he did the one at Case. Don't ask me to, win the spelling bee for you, but
okay.
But we have, all kinds of homes over here. I'm on the east side, and so we have some mid-century modern coolness happening over here. But my decor sense, I'm a huge fan of the mid-century modern furniture. And so my house sometimes at different points in my life has looked like a museum. This is exactly what it looked like in 1963. But my taste has kind of been all over the place. But I kind of anchor my main decor sense in that mid-century modern. It's a big love for me. So I naturally gravitate towards that art that was coming out during that time, especially painting, abstract painters. Joan Mitchell is one of my favorite abstract painters.
Sure.
I love her big time. Because I think there was a magic that happened with the furniture when you have this functionality with this beauty and this simplicity, and I think some of the architects were influenced by some of the Japanese design. And that was some of my most favorite stuff that was happening at that time period. And one thing I like about Joan Mitchell with the art is she found this way to say a lot with less, but it still had a feminine feel to it. And there were some of, like Haywood Wakefield, for example. I love the Haywood Wakefield furniture. And you had these beautiful curves, but you still had the strength and that intention of the lines, And there is a beauty of marrying both of those things to me, that when I see it happen in architecture, in design, in art, it's just beautiful to me. I think whatever invokes making you feel good, or you gravitate towards it, or it creates a couch for you in some way, I say it's a winning moment,
Well, you are all right, Colleen.
Well, I got to be selfish for a second, because I was on your website, and I just want to say I was very moved by this, right? And I just want to read this off your website for those of you who maybe have not read it lately. It says, America's brilliant mid-century modernist houses are livable works of art, torn down in record numbers, largely because buyers, sellers, and realtors don't realize the importance of what they have or how to preserve, repair, and protect them. You can't save something if you don't know where it is or why it is important. And I know that seems kind of vague, but it brought tears to my eyes, because I was going through your website and I was looking at the passion that you have and the passion in the community that supports this website. And I was thinking about our conversation, and I was thinking about the music, and I was thinking about how important it is to understand the music that came before now, and how we have a new generation of artists that feel very lost. A lot of them feel very lost because they've been so inundated with stuff coming in on social media and stuff coming in on the internet. It's like they haven't had time to learn the history.
Not at all.
And so those of us, I grew up watching The Little Rascals just like my mom did. I mean, there are similarities, even though we were in different generations. We shared certain things. I grew up on some of the same music that my mom grew up on. Those days are over. I was just thinking about why it is important to value these things and advocate for the stack of vinyl records that nobody wants, or this house that someone moved out of, but no one realizes this amazing architect or this designer or this painting that you find at the thrift store, and you're like, I'm sorry, is this the real thing? It's amazing, the things that you can find, and it really takes that special soul to see that original point zero of that moment when someone said, let's do this. And it's so important. Am I making sense right now?
You are making complete sense. You are singing our song, Colleen.
You are preaching to the choir.
Yes. Hallelujah. Praise be. Now, you have some very loyal fans, too. In fact, you had a very successful fundraising campaign for the album, which helped you produce it. And the album's called Lover and a Fighter. Tell us about it.
Well, it's really interesting. When I had gotten sick, there was this thing that happened where I got I was embarrassed that I was sick, right? I didn't want to let anybody down. I had been kind of sick for a while, but after I ended up in a wheelchair and couldn't walk, and all this, myriad of weirdness had happened, I decided to just go public and do a medical expense fundraising campaign. I didn't really understand crowdfunding. I did it. It was hugely successful. People were so appreciative that I was honest with them, because I'm a very private person by nature. Social media is very difficult for me. And so it was really amazing, the amount of support. The most commonly said thing was people said, "Your music has gotten me through so much. Please allow me to return the favor." That was the most commonly said thing. And what it did, esteemably speaking, to me as an artist, was it changed my life. And I realized that confidence and self-esteem really are not the same thing. So much healing happened by being supported by the fans that when I decided to go ahead and do this new record, I didn't realize how much music I was actually sitting on. And so when I was well enough to actually go back to Los Angeles and gather up some friends and some studio musicians and just make it happen, I'd never done this before, for a record. I did it on Indiegogo because you can keep the money. You have that option of keeping the money even if you don't make your goal.
Yes.
Which is why I didn't do Kickstarter. It freaked me out too much. I said, well, if that happens, then all that cortisol will be for naught. Let it be for sale. Let's turn it into lemonade. And so we did make our goal. It was amazing. I think it was like $28,000 or something. I ended up going way over that, but people kept showing up. It was a breathtaking experience doing crowdfunding and creating this relationship with people and realizing how much music means to them and how much my music in particular. Because the one thing about my music is every song is kind of a little bit of a different genre. I'm very old-timey, vintage. I'm very like 40s, 50s, 60s influenced. But every song is a little bit different, but there's that thread of that continuity is the storytelling. And it's a very cathartic process most of the time, the stories that I tell, not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
And people responded very strongly and are supporting this record. We just dropped a couple singles, and any moment now the record is dropping. I'm putting it out myself. It's called Lover and a Fighter. Everybody's really super excited.
Why don't we listen to something from that album?
Yes, this track is called Back Home to Me.
Yes.
In the skies they all fall down without you around, and the birds refuse to sing. They won't fly or spread their wings, and the time it ticks so slow. Wonder if the wind will blow you back home to me. And the sun refused to shine at the thought that you weren't mine. And the skies, they grew so cold, so gray and so alone. And it rained for days and days, like teardrops on parade. With my name on your heart, in my hair, in your hand, would you work the line for me? Would you be my man? Well, I would do anything for you if you never asked me to, because I love you. Oh, all filled the sky just as you said goodbye, and the leaves just swirled around. You were nowhere to be found, and teardrops on parade. With my name on your heart, in my hair, in your hand, would you walk the line for me? Would you be my man? Well, I would do anything for you if you never asked me to, because I love you. Oh, yeah.
You don't sound like you have some kind of disease to me. You sound very healthy.
That was my hat tip to Otis Redding.
Yeah.
Which we're both kind of obsessed with. Sam Cooke was an influence on both of us, but yeah, I was a bit influenced by the Stax Records era, and that was my moment there.
And you don't see many songs nowadays that have, a trumpet solo in the middle?
In the middle, well, at the end, there's a trumpet solo. But it's funny, it's like the dichotomy of what I love to do. We put New Orleans-style horns at the end of something that is, it totally doesn't fit, but that's what Devil Doll is. It's the devil and the doll, the dichotomy, the darkness and the light, just putting these things together and finding the beauty in it. I love it. I get such a kick out of it. That's one of my favorite things to do. But yeah, you picked up on that. That's a perfect example of what I do.
Well, let's set the scene. It's a dark and stormy night in 1958. And Mies van der Rohe and Marcel Breuer and Walter Gropius are in a car together, an old Chevy. And they're driving across from Chicago to New York. And they stop in a Roadhouse bar to get some dinner. And up on the stage is this really vivacious woman performing a song. That's what I think of when I hear the tune Bourbon in Your Eyes that Colleen made famous years ago. One of her biggest hits is somebody in one of those Roadhouse clubs just belting it out. It's really sensational, Colleen, and people keep rediscovering that song on streaming all the time.
Yeah, it's one of our most requested songs, and I would have to say that burlesque performers have probably performed that song more than any of my other songs.
Well, why don't we listen to it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here we go.
Excuse me while I do a little striptease number here.
Close your eyes.
Take my hand, wishing you could be my man, but I can't tell if it's truth or lies when you've got bourbon in your eyes. Tell me something that I don't do, then I dare you to prove it so. I'd ask you to try this on for size, but you've got bourbon in your eyes. You're so I find myself showing up at your front door. Although I can't come in, I keep coming back for more. And when you call me baby, it feels just like a lie. And every time you smile when you look into touch me there, but I will not open up my thighs when you've got bourbon in your eyes. You're the one who makes me smile, and I know you'd make it worth my while, but she's waiting for you, and I think she cries when you've got bourbon in your eyes. You're so I find myself showing up at your front door, although I can't come in. I keep coming back for more, and when you call me baby, it feels just like a lie. And every time you smile, when you look into my eyes, you don't have the guts to love me like you wish you could. I'm gonna find someone to make me feel the way I should. You're so sweet talking, you're so fire walking. I know I shouldn't, but I want some. Little boy, you're lost, I see you looking around, but I think that you know more than you let on. Cause I know you're kind. You'd wake me up just to say goodbye. I know that's not a tear in your eye, 'cause boys don't cry and neither do I. I might be in love, but I'll never say, so I guess I'll be on my way. At least I gave it a try.
You don't have the guts to love me the way you wish you could. Wow. I miss being on the radio. I'd love to play that song. Colleen Duffy, Devil Doll.
You know, Colleen, besides being great for burlesque, it is also an excellent blues dancing song. It has the perfect rhythm to do close dancing, 1, 2, 3, 4, going around the dance floor. Excellent. I've seen at least a dozen tracks of Bourbon in Your Eyes on YouTube set to various backgrounds, but I couldn't find an original video. Did you shoot one?
No, I've actually never done an actual, what we know to be a music video where you have a storyline and the singer and, you know, everybody's there. I've never actually done that. I only have live videos, and I just never really had the budget to do it, and I was always so busy, like, managing the band and booking the band and touring and playing, that hopefully that'll happen by the end of the year. You know, I'd like to start doing that type of thing with this record.
Well, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for spending time with us. It's wonderful.
Oh, and thank you. You know, George, thank you for what you do and with your organization. It's so important. And the archiving, it's truly mind-blowing. I hope it's not a thankless job for you, because it is just so important what you're doing, and just it really blew me away, what you're involved with and your passion. And just as a resource, the site is just mind-blowing what you've managed to create here.
Well, when I fly again, I'll make sure to fly up to Cleveland and take you to lunch.
Hee-haw!
Hee-haw!
I'll show you all my favorite places.
Okay, you're on.
was Colleen Duffy of Devil Doll with George Smart. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned as we bring more shows from 2020's Modernism Week in Palm Springs. You want to hang out with us at the swanky U.S. Modernist compound at Modernism Week in February 2021? Email George at usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist is underwritten by Nichiha.com/US Modernist and by Angela Roll, your special agent for Modernist Houses, 919-995-0550. All right, take us out, George.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to our past shows, discover documentation of 7,000 significant modernist houses, and access over 2.8 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studio in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by me and Robinson Earl. Carrie Cesarino researches guests while juggling 2 children, a bowling ball, a chainsaw, and salsa dancing with husband Adam. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm George Smart, and there's no Frank Sinatra tune I won't dance to by his pool in Palm Springs. We'll be back soon with another Fly Me to the Moon, The Way You Look Tonight, I've Got You Under My Skin edition of U.S. Modernist Radio. Cheers.